welcome all of you to this panel discussion and video podcast town hall on the theme Why should corporate invest for their own sake in rule of law for Viksit Bharat? So we are very fortunate to have with us today Mr. Khera, President Federation of Gujarat Industry, Mr. Sonvi Khanna, Director Social Compact, Mr. Gagan Sethi, Access to Justice Advocate, Mr. Minar Pimple, Social Impact Leadership Coach. We are really fortunate to have you here and I warmly welcome all of you here. I am really thankful to Gagan sir for providing this opportunity to our students to be a part of this thought-provoking panel discussion. As it is being called, rule of law is the bedrock on which a just society rests. In the words of Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of UN, he said that the proper governance is the key for eradicating poverty and promoting development. If we see the World Bank report, it says that the countries which have stronger rule of law has 70% more FDI investment. So rule of law is so important. So when India is moving towards Viksit Bharat 2047, rule of law for corporates to invest in rule of law is not a charity. It's a strategy to build a stronger, safer and Viksit Bharat. So I welcome all of you. I extend my warm welcome to our faculty members and my dear students. I'm sure after today's dialogue, there would be spark of fresh ideas on how corporate and law can work together to make India a safer, stronger and Viksit Bharat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jani. Thank you so much. And, a very warm welcome to all you students. And this is part of a collaboration with LJ University. But as a larger frame, we have a podcast called Unmute. We have today two guests, Mr. Khera, because the topic is about business and human rights. The idea was, do we have a sensitive businessman, a practitioner who actually practices and not just his theory? So as students, we thought who would be the best person to bring to you. Mr. Khera comes from Baroda. He is managing director of a company called C Lincoln. I've been to his factory. Environmentally up to date, compliance is up to date, and therefore ethics-wise, he practices what is business and human rights. He's also, and that's where we meet together, he's the president of the Federation of Gujarat Industry. In that case, he's an influencer for all industries who are members of, and we'll talk about that later, for all members who are part of the Federation of Gujarat Industry. He's part of Heritage Society. Yeah. He's part of Navratna School's board. So, when a person is all round, it's just not about business is business. Business is part of society. And I think Samir, and I call him Samir because he's also a dear friend, epitomizes that a person can be part of society, do business, make money, but also contribute to the idea of rule of law. And as Dr. Chitali said, we are pretty bad on the rule of law index. India is at the moment 79 out of 142 countries on the rule of law index. And very intrinsically linked is the idea of order and security. And India is 98th country in the one out of 142 in order and security. And that's very closely linked with how it affects business and vice versa. We therefore, as law students, we need to explore some of those aspects and understand, and who better than Khera with us today. So thank you, Sameer, for joining us. So once again, thank you. Let's give him a big hand, please.
So Sonvi is a kind of a very well-known, Sonvi Khanna heads the social compact, which was incubated as part of Dasra initiatives and has been part of the social compact. And looking at the whole issue of, you have this framework, which is environment, social and governance. So basically looking at those three kinds of areas, but she then focuses on the social part of that, ESG framework. So that is what her key area of work is. And I'm sure when we hear her, we will know more about it and what she's doing, how it links with all of your work and your future work. I think that's what we'll do. So without further ado, Sameer.
Thank you, everyone. Warm words and appreciate all of that, and welcome to all the students here itself. Apologize once again for being late. Though I had factored in, and I think in the overall sense, when we talk of sustainability, I think the amount of unsustainable practices I saw in the last 45 minutes is not funny. Anyway, I think the industry, how it is responding to the rule of law, the BRSR standards, and to the entire framework around ESG, if I can call it that. Businesses, as you know, has different stakeholders. Primary allegiance of a business, I imagine, would be to the shareholders. So obviously, we are talking of profit as a means of ensuring that a business remains sustainable. However, a business also has other stakeholders, and starting from its own employees, starting from their supply chain, starting from the society that they work in. And in that context, I think it's extremely important that to keep businesses sustainable, that engagement with all the stakeholders is on an equal and fair footing. Like I said right in the beginning, I don't think a business cannot aim to be a charitable organization, because at the end of the day, the way the capitalist world is structured, without giving value to shareholders, I think there is always going to be a challenge in ensuring that a business will remain sustainable. However, a business can also be sustainable whilst ensuring that the entire ecosystem is taken care of. And talking in very, very layman terms, I think we talk of minimum wages. I think the dialogue has moved already to living wages. If there is a spending power available with your employees, or that itself is ultimately going to come back into the system. So it is important for businesses to ensure that all the stakeholder interests are taken care of. Having said that, I don't think the realization that I got or we got as a company, I don't want to say that we have been very benevolent or anything. I think that primary push again came from the fact that we are primarily an export-driven company, and to export, I think there was a Sarbanes-Oxley Act which came up in the first decade of this century, and that put up different kinds of compliance requirements at least on the US multinationals, and those compliances then automatically kind of filtered down to their supply chain. And to be a part of that, we have also had to gear up our systems to ensure that those compliances, we are part of those compliances. So we got thinking about all these issues that we are kind of talking about today. And of course, now those compliances which started from maybe the angle of corruption, got into human rights, got into sustainability. We are talking of environment today, governance, and all that entire gamut which the ESG frameworks capture today. So any organization which wants to grow, which wants to be sustainable, today has to look at these factors as one of the key areas in terms of how they are going to approach their business on a routine basis and even on a ongoing sustainable basis. It's important to also understand that the way the financial world is structured today, if you are working on ESG, if you are working on being a compliant company, the valuations you get are definitely much better than what you would get otherwise. I think the Indian ecosystem is slowly gearing up to the same norms that countries otherwise are following. And we have, of course, now the BRSR regulations where the top 1,000 companies by market cap have to file their reporting. And I think that's anyway the first step. And I'm sure as we go along, this entire drive towards will filter down to all the companies which are part of these supply chains. And any matter of fact, I think that's a good thing. I think there needs to be attention paid to these issues, because if not businesses, then who else is going to do it, right? The government can only propose. The government can lay down laws, but ultimately, as I'm sure you're part of law, you know that as Indians, we are also very adept at finding loopholes. So I think it's important that businesses set the example and ensure that this motive towards good standards, compliance is ongoing and it keeps going on.
So just a little bit about what we do. We actually work with companies like Sameer's or who want to be like Sameer's to start focusing on knowing, first of all, what are the gaps in their people practices, and we tend to focus more on what today constitutes 50 to 80% of the blue-collar workforce in any company in the country, which is the impermanent or contractual workforce. So I don't know if you're already familiar with labor laws or not, but in India, thanks to a few legal changes in the latter half of the previous century, the laws became such that a large percentage of workforce across industry started to become contractual to prevent retrenchment laws, etc. from applying. And that would have gone fine, there's no problem with that, had it not become an out of sight, out of mind story for 50 to 80% of the workforce. So today, a large part of industry, across industries, is running with a blue-collar workforce which is 50 to 80% not on their rolls, and therefore they do not have much accountability towards it as the law kind of looks at it. So as we go through the conversation today, I think I would really like to connect with where you all sit right now as people aspiring to be in the legal setting of the country, and would love to share what would be good to avoid. I hope you will not become managers of the law, but really custodians of the law, because it's very interesting that the rule of law is basically created to ensure that a basic level of dignity is ensured to every human being, irrespective of where they sit in the ecosystem. And after that, we can all start to, like Sameer said, talk about what does capitalism offer for me? How can I maximize my profits, etc., etc. But unfortunately, over the last 40 years, the story has devolved into how a certain segment of industry can grow, while the other side should stay at minimum wages being maximum wages for the foreseeable future. So would love to talk about it and see the role each of you can play, as you all will aspire to be in corporate law, and hopefully some parts of labor will crash in as well, to see what you can bring as transparency to the system, to see where the system is running a risk. And it will actually be a myopic thing to not correct those loopholes, those gaps, because eventually when it leads to a fire or when it leads to a expose in the newspaper, the company pays a lot more than it would have saved by not complying with those laws. So would love to talk about our experience doing that eventually.
So let's start with the first question to Sameer. You mentioned it in your opening remarks, Sameer, but just to a little bit go deeper in terms of what shaped your personal commitment to the ethical and sustainable business practices, other than the business requirement themselves? And what is that distinguishes you to follow for this business, ethical and sustainable practices? And that may help some of the people who might want to become the entrepreneurs and what to do from the beginning to really build that muscle into them. Samir.
Interesting question, because I probably have to think back as to, but I think it's just a question of the ideas and values we were exposed to. I did my management in Bombay at a school at SBJN and I think the entire ecosystem at that point kind of imbibed those values which kind of stay. I think it made sense that sometimes you also feel that the cost of trying to find shortcuts and do things not the way they should be done is more than actually ensuring that why do we want to deviate from a path which is well established and which we can easily take, instead of wasting time and energy in trying to figure out what are the loopholes in terms of how you want to be where you want to be. The business, I've been involved with this business now for 35 odd years. It's a second generation business. My father started it. Both me and my brother are part of this. Of course, we lost our father a long time ago, and I think both of us, fortunately, also within the family, there was an understanding that let's stick to what we are happy with, what we are, at the end of the day, we can go to sleep well, and that it was a conscious choice at that time, not to work with companies where there is where there are practices which you feel that those are not what you want to do. I think that's probably where it all started. And along the way, like I said, I think the exposure that we got, because we were exporting to a lot of companies overseas, and fortunately, I think the kind of practices that we saw in place, the systems which were there in place, it allowed us the ability to assimilate, absorb, understand that these are really the practices that you need to follow going forward. I think it was just kind of structured in the value system that as a family, as a education, and then even in the corporate world, I think what we were exposed to, and it just then became a base that this is what we want to do. So I'm not sure if that really.
Yeah. I think that's very important, and therefore the good question to ask: what values do you take from your family and from the institutes? I think those are good questions. But Sonvi, I know you've been focusing on, as a strategy, on the S of the ESG, and it's a critical part, most ignored. People have chartered accountants to handle the G, and they have environmental consultants to handle the E. Why, therefore, choose this S as a driver for ethical business? Why did Dasra sort of look at this and the process?
Just to give you a very short history, we are 5 years old. The social compact is 5 years old, right? It's not very far back. And as all of you have lived and known, 5 years back, COVID struck and a lot came to a standstill. And it offered a moment of reflection to a lot of industry to say, we actually right now, when we are seeing this massive exodus of migrant workers going on foot from the cities of work to their homes back in the villages, some industrialists actually came to us and said, I'm actually not sure that nobody from my supply chain is walking the road right now, completely uncovered and unprotected. And that blew up what the status quo has kind of made peace with for 40 odd years, that it's actually difficult and quite a risk to the business to not know who 80% of its blue collar workforce is and how are they faring. Today it's a pandemic and you are troubled because it's a matter of life and death. But to not know even on a day-to-day basis how that 50 to 80% of your workforce, which is on contract or as naps or as apprentices with you, you have no clue on how they are faring, and that's quite problematic. if you don't know how they are faring, you also do a poor job of holding yourself accountable to their well-being and all the compliances that come with them. So what we started was an industry NGO partnership, a platform which helps the principal company, and by principal company, I mean, for instance, if Sameer's company is the principal company, his contracted workforce is kind of, he's the principal company to his contracted workforce, where the contractor is actually the employer of that workforce, right? Am I saying it correctly? And so we help the principal company hear the voice of all workers who are keeping their business afloat. And we created that contrary to what lawyers do typically, which is paper trail checks. We actually speak with a representative sample of the entire workforce, contractual and otherwise, on the shop floors and support functions of any principal company, and bring that lived experience along the law and more to the principal company to say, here is what the lived experience looks like. Doesn't matter what compliance or legatrix is telling you after paper trail checks. And this strategy has helped us in two ways. They say if you want to do systems change, I don't know how many of you understand that, but if you want to change the system, change the conditions that hold the problem in place. And one of the biggest problems we saw in this setup of industry between principal company and 80% of its blue collar workforce was the information flow, right? And we tried to bypass that information flow around the contractor to say, we are going to bring the voice of the workforce to the company that they work for, and not just to the employer on paper, which is the contractor, and see what that does to the conscience of the company, what that does to their sense of perceived risk and security, and how would they then like to address that in the long run. Different companies took different strategies. Some went ahead and created helplines so that even outside of the social compact, they could hear 24/7 what was happening on the ground with the entire workforce. Others came to us and said, train us in your methodology. We have a very large group and we can't keep calling you, but we'd like to be able to use this listening loop to hear what's happening in one plant versus another. So train us in that. Others came and said, we'd like you to give us a strategy on what will be a win-win for my workforce and the business and their collective growth over the next 10 years. So it's been different things for different companies, but we've really tried to change this relationship mix between the contractual workforce and the principal company, the information flow between them, to say, let's see if you can still sleep well at night, right? Because so far you were sleeping well, thinking you are a great place to work, but that's only from 20% of your workforce has responded to that questionnaire, because only 20% is yours, quote unquote, right? So really trying to embrace that little ecosystem, because we do see that there are challenges with governance at the state levels, at the government level, but as companies, you have a much smaller pond to take care of. And how about you go ahead and do that, right? Create that internal governance and accountability mechanism so that those 150, 200, 5,000, 1 lakh people who are in your ecosystem, you're actually saying, I can vouch for it, they're decently well and on the road to getting out of poverty eventually.
Yes, Sonvi, I think you have hit the nail. And if you remember, we did one study together of a large company, I'm not going to take the name, and we actually found that the contractor, the wages are directly paid to the bank account of the worker, and the contractor had to certify that it's done, the contractor paid. But when we went into the the worker's house and spent the evening and listened, he said, but the company pays me full, but the contractor has my debit card. And when we reported this to the head of the company, he said, my God, I didn't know that. We'll correct it. So the point is that sometimes it's the middle who are trying to manage and not be the ethical positions and help in improving the situation. And I'm saying this to you because you have a choice to make. You can manage or you can improve. That's the choice you will definitely make. And that's why I come to Sami. I want to ask him, what strategy do you do to help the members, move from what were traditional practices to what I call ethical practices, or contribute to the understanding that compliance is not about managing, but by taking and what
Taking
Chetali
responsibility.
said,
Yeah.
is really pushing for a Viksit Bharat.
I think I'll just pick up on what Sonvi said. One is that it's okay to have the ideas and to have the vision and to have the will to do something. But in any organization, there is a bureaucracy, even if it's a private organization. And like you said, to manage that bureaucracy, to understand the benefits which come out of this is the biggest challenge in my view. So, I mean, before we go to FGI, I mean, the question really is that, and within our company, how do you overcome those challenges? And I think with the social compact, we also went through an audit process. And so the question, I think, and which we have discussed with the SOCO team and otherwise is, as a businessman, at the end of the day, one needs to understand what is the outcome of all this process that you go through. I mean, there is obviously the angle of compliances and ESG, but everybody has found a fix for that.
Yeah.
Right? But in reality, what is it that you can really get benefits out of going through such an audit, ensuring that in your company the systems are established and people not just follow it, but also are finding ways to improve upon what is being done. So I think it's a question of, and I don't blame individuals or companies for this. I think it's just that I think the entire evolution of industry, the law, the license raj, I think the way things have evolved over the past decades, I think has always led entrepreneurs and businessmen to view some of the laws in with the way they are implemented, the way they are applied, the kind of malpractices that they give rise to. I think there is always, they are taken with the view of dark view that if we go too much on this way, we are likely to face pushback or other issues will come up. So I think at the end of the day, it's a question of, first is the education part of it. I think understanding that these issues are essential to a sustainable organization. As we go along this journey, I think it's very important to understand that there is no other way, right? And I think the companies which go on this way faster are the ones which are likely to be more sustainable going forward in the future. And that's the message that at FGI we have been trying to enjoy. So we set up a center of excellence with the SOCO team. We've had workshops, we've done conclaves, and so the question is, it's a process. I am sure that everyone feels this process should be a lot faster, but there are certain pain points which we have to address as we go along, and every company will have its own lethargy to accept that change the way we expect that it is going to happen. Having said that, I think the way to do it is have case studies, show these to industry in terms of the benefits and the advantages that organizations have got by going down this path, and that's what we are trying to do at HGS.
Building on the response that Samir gave, so if you look at it from the social compacts perspective, you work with industries. We are now in a kind of a deregulation era in terms of the Indian economy, the way even in the changes in the labor law which are being proposed, in the new labor codes. Looking at all those areas, From your vantage point, Sonvi, what do you see? How much commitment or passion you experience from the industry's perspective to really ensuring the rights and the dignity of the working classes in that sense, in that broader sense? What's been your experience, and if you can put some light on that?
It's not very heartening, to be precise, right? I think what is heartening is our increasing conviction that there are many tailwinds that are kind of mustering together if only industry would open its eyes to it. And I'd like to outline a few, right? The reducing age group of the working class, the demographic dividend is in our favor. If we continue to see so many young people, and I particularly focus on 200 million who are informally engaged in the formal sector, I always talk about those. Many of whom are in the entry level, low paying, unskilled jobs. If you continue to see them as a herd, कि 100 आए 100 जाएंगे, फिर आ जाएंगे. I think it's terrible for industry to have such little vision on how it can harness this potential, build it and bet better on it. It speaks volumes. Whenever I go to an industry congregation, everybody follows the bill on the productivity of the worker for not meeting or being competitive with China. To be very precise, where is the R&D, where is the innovation, where is the leadership from top to bottom to compete with China? It's a completely different ballgame altogether. It's not about labor productivity alone. So the demographic dividend, and whether you're going to see it as chalate aaye hain, chalate jayenge, or are you seeing this as an opportunity to turn the tables, is question number one. I think question number two is Viksit Bharat. 400 million people will not be customers for what you're building. It's a country of 150 crore people. 1/8 the world's population is your market. So if you build the aspiration and you create, consumer capability amongst all classes of the population, you're actually strengthening industry and its local market. It's self-sufficiency to a very large extent. And who knew what blows would come from the global market, right? To exports and to our sort of emphasis on that. So when I look at, whenever we work with industry, we bet on two things. One, of course, what Samir said, which is what's the right thing to do. And obviously, if you're doing the right thing to do, the cost of management and the cost of managing your mental stress and fires when they happen is much lower. Fortunately or unfortunately, we were even asking Samir of Wage Indicator, which does living wage studies across the world. And we said, can you tell us what's the gain, quantifiable gain that people have seen by giving people living wages? And the answers weren't quantified, right? It's just that your overall productivity changes because you're not trying to protect the company, you're actually unleashing the company, right? You're setting all guns blazing on the right side. But we work with the company to say, can you really think about these 2,000 people, these 2,500 people as potential that you're going to build, and think and reimagine your business basis that. And a question I get a lot of times is fear, right? It's plain fear. How can I employ so many people? What will happen if if demand goes down, etc. And we recently did a calculation for one of our companies and said, let's replace fear with actual calculations. We were trying to advocate to them to go for living wages. There are 2,500 people. It's a very typical size of company in India, with very typical wages of average 15,000 rupees for the workers. We did the entire maths, along with ESI, PF coverage for these people, going from 15,000 take home to 25,000 take home over 2 years. Cost to company was 0.48% more as percentage of revenue than what it is today. Kitna sure, how much? We'll go bankrupt, this is not viable. When the CEO salary doubles, nobody says that. No? The other question I get from industry is, we can't be the ones, and you will get this a lot as lawyers. So you better be prepared to push back. How can I move the rule of the ilaka? I don't want to be seen as the one who's giving 2x overtime and nobody gives 2x overtime. But you don't say that when your profits are triple more than your neighbors in the same industrial park, or your CEO margins are 4 times more than. Then why on this one cadre? And I think that's where the rule of law and you as custodians rather than managers of the rule of law really comes in. And that's why I asked you the question, why are you here? Why are you doing this? If it's only because it's a respectable job, it'll only stay respectable if you're batting for everyone. It may seem like a respectable job as a label, but where we come from, we see lawyers really bargaining their degree for what they can mine out of it and not really being custodians of the law as they should be. So I think I'll kind of take a pause here and say, wherever you see fear, push back with logic, push back with calculations, really try to see how people are, what is the cost they are going to save by doing the wrong thing as opposed to the right thing. And that should be the point of conversation.
So Gagan, I think it's a good time on this particular pause that to open it up for because the two other questions that we wanted to explore, I think both of them in their earlier answers have covered it. So let's open it for a kind of a conversation a little bit and here. And it's not necessarily only questions that we are expecting. If some of you have comments on what you have heard, like one of the key things both of them have said is, are we going to be managing, or in a Hindi we say jugaad? Are we going to be engaged in jugaad, or are we going to be doing something which is ethical, which is something which is, legally ensuring rights of everybody? We are not taking sides here, but we are saying that it should be fair for everybody. It should not be fair for only one set of people and unfair for other set of people. That's what we are talking about here. Okay. So I think some of those questions, which are ethical questions, which are part of law but beyond law. So let's take a little bit of a conversation, and some of you have, I'm sure, will come up with questions that you want to ask.
Good afternoon. The discussion was really fruitful, and kudos to both of you for doing such a wonderful work in respective industries you are in. My name is Tamanna and I am in 4th year of BBA LLB. My question is specifically to Mr. Sameer. As she said that the fear was one of the identification she had, that people were being resistant. Being the director of FGI or being the head of FGI, what is the key resistant area you feel that industries are not complying towards the rule of law, and what is the vacuum or what is the gap you identify where we lawyers come in to improve, not to micromanage people?
Hello, I'm Shita, and I wanted to talk about the informal workers which Sonvi ma'am spoke about. So we know that informal workers are largely left out of the legal landscape in India, and as you mentioned, due to the contractual nature of the job or by being employed through middlemen, they face various issues. So I wanted to know, how would you reimagine this ecosystem that exists for informal workers in such a way that legal benefits reach them, but at the same time the measures introduced are not so rigid that the informal system itself collapses?
Very, very interesting question. How do we balance that the people don't lose their jobs, but at the same time they also get their rights? Okay, I want few more questions. Hello.
Hello, good evening, dignities. And my name is Hiri Shah from 3rd year. So my question is that rule of law is connected with equality before law. And in corporate sector, corporate sector is not only connected with laborers; it's also connected with all our dignities. So the corporate should focus more on equity before equality. So how would you convert equity?
Good morning, everyone. Myself Prag Panda, and I am from 1st year, Sem 1. So my question is to you, Sameer sir, that in corporate world there is two main sectors, like first to survive and secondly is profit, to gain profit. But beyond profit, is there a responsibility of the corporate world to actively support rule of law for the society?
Good evening to one and all present, respected dignitaries. Myself, Medha Khera, from Sem 9 of 5 years program. Sir, my question to all the dignitaries is that, can the corporates grow sustainably in an environment where contracts are not enforceable or disputes that takes years to resolve? because at such a growing speed, the corporates should also be taking the speed, and with all the issues regarding the taxes and all. So how does it manage, and how can we get a proper result with we can say the problems we are facing. So how to resolve all this?
So you're talking about the delays in the justice system. Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
yes.
Okay, yeah.
My name is Shail Panchal from Seven. Sir, my question is to both of you. It's a neutral question. I would like to talk about the financial perspective of the industrial operation. So, talking about PLI's production-linked incentives and FDIs that would attract foreign domestic investments. So, sir, when we are talking about corporate sectors of the functioning of the society, corporate people or the corporate community is generally considered to be well versed in such sectors. So, how would we actually look upon the fact that people who are relying upon us, or rather the whole criteria of another people who are trying to invest or rather grasp the situation of current economical state of India, how would you suggest that we should conduct a fair and just manner under the rule of law? However, we belonging to corporate sector are putting in twice as much efforts, hard work and personal investments such as time, brains and everything else.
Okay, that's another perspective.
I think so. I'll just kind of summarize. I may not go specifically to each question, but firstly, I think we should all be clear. Corporates, businesses operate under the rule of law. I think let's not get confused by what we are discussing here. I think there is the entire paradigm on which our society is based is under a rule of law, and corporates, like I said, are stakeholders of that system, and they also have to comply with the rule of law. Okay. Now, having said that, I think there were a few questions. I think there was something about the fear quotient. I know we discussed labor productivity, capital productivity, and insofar as, let's say, at least as far as I am concerned and the kind of environment that I know, today, the challenge is to retain people, right? 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the challenge, I mean, we're talking of minimum wage or living wage. Today, when you have somebody who comes into your workforce, you spend some time there, you train that person. And I'm talking of not very formal training, but even in terms of the kind of training you would give to, let's say, an ITI or even a non-ITI who comes on into your workforce. When you train him, you want to do your best to retain. I think also industry today doesn't want to spend time training and retraining a workforce which is not available. And I think that's also something which we need to understand. I know the informal sector may be slightly different in the sense that, but even in the informal sector, once the individual comes into your workforce, by and large, if most of the requirements are met, I think industry wants to ensure that you retain them. And which is what Sonvi said, when somebody comes to you with a fear quotient, that quotient is really not valid, right? Because at the end of the day, when you graduate from a minimum wage to a living wage or to providing amenities and which the workforce is entitled to, it could be a very small fraction of the percentage you might be spending on your marketing, or it could even be, a lot of companies I know are also doing that as a part of their CSR, so they channelize it differently. So what we need to remember is that, and in general, and I am not trying to diminish businesses or corporates, I think that's not the idea of this discussion. The corporates are in general very responsible, they operate within the rule of law, right? But I think that, like I said earlier as well, that there is a historical paradigm as to how a lot of this has come up. also the issue is that we talk of labor productivity, but more than labor productivity, capital productivity is very important. Right? Somebody spoke about the PLI schemes and all of that. In India, the capital productivity can only flow with investment in innovation, in R&D, and we cannot just assign, blame may not be the right word, but assign fault to the workforce that you can't. I think we need to understand the complexities of the entire situation, and we can't really paint everything with the same brush. So if you want to.
Yeah, I think somebody asked equity. For us, equity is voice. Voice is equity, right? That the systems that manage me should hear from me, right? They should not be made by lawyers and the CEOs to keep me in my place. And I just want to quote, this is not a change that we are seeing for the first time, or this is not a reimagining that we are doing for the first time. India, 30 years ago, its white-collar workforce was trained to only be clerks. There was only sir, whose business it was, and the rest could not aspire to be anything more than clerks. If you were really lucky, closer to retirement, you might become managing director. Really lucky. What changed? Are any of us aspiring to be clerks and white-collar jobs today? India has seen an unleashing of the white collar. The entrepreneurial spirit is at an all-time high. Why? What changed? We started hearing from these white-collar people, and a function called human resources came up. No company has solved its white-collar problems completely either. Doesn't matter what you hear. Great place to work, fantastic place to work, etc. We are all in the journey. That's not a problem. But the journey is agile, systems work, this function called HR works 24/7 to hear, to take it back to the leadership, to correct, to reflect, to reinvent. We are trying to bring the same process to the blue-collar workforce, and we found that it wasn't so simple because the blue-collar workforce, the 1,000 people that a company may be deploying as blue-collar workforce to run its functions, the company is not accountable for all 1,000 of them. It's only accountable for 200 because those are the only 200 that sit on its roads. So it's a little more complicated. That when they are not your workers, how do you bring the voice of the worker to yourself? And that is the journey the social compact is on. Because we feel this journey is also, I may not see the change in my lifetime, but we are happy to invest in altering the system and saying that you've got to see, you've done a fantastic job with the white collar workforce. Still way to go, but you were able to change what was meant to be a very mediocre job into sky's the limit. And you can do the same thing, and we have to do it because we are talking of 400 million people. And there's no, you can do whatever you want, grow as rich as you want, build the best roads, best bridges, best premium economies, but the collective mental health and well-being of the country will continue to suffer. Our collective self-esteem will continue to suffer, and we'll continue to put the same blame game, ki teri galti hai, until everybody is at beyond the threshold of security. So it is our collective responsibility, doesn't matter what hat you're donning, to ensure that we stop people from entering myopic equations that harm the country and harm the most vulnerable people, or come at the cost of the most vulnerable people in the long run. If everyone's happy, everyone's going to succeed.
Putting it both together, yes, Sonvi, you're right. There is a rule of law framework, and yet we are so poor in the rule of law index, which means there is a default at all levels. There is a corruption index where we are low. Who is supposed to take the lead to correct this? It becomes a big issue. Is it government? Is it industry? Is it civil society? I think we can keep passing the buck. And that's what Sonvi says. is why are we not coming together? And we are only, the blame game. And the question to you, therefore, is, you have, in a sense, in your own company, adopted stricter environmental standards, so moto. There's also a legal, you could have bought those people, and added to the corruption index. You choose not to. Therefore, you take a personal position. What are the challenges you face then when you want to adhere to the rule of law? I think that's a good question which I would like you to respond to.
Firstly, I think I completely agree. I think it's a collective responsibility. I don't think expecting that the government will do what it needs to do and civil society will do what it needs to do and industry will do what we need. Unless there is convergence and unless everybody works together, I don't see any improvement happening. And I think I know that the interface that as our company had with the social compact, it has, over the last 3 years, it has given a definite value. And I'm sure that the same value other companies will see when this adopt and accept that these are, I think it's just a question of opening the mind that there are things which need to change and there is somebody who's helping you to do that. And again, second point is that as MSMEs, we are an MSME, right? We can't afford to hire we can't afford a legal department, we can't afford so we have to learn how to work with agencies which are well-meaning, right, but which may be external, and which is generally one of the challenges which comes up when you speak internally, that you're working with an external agency, you are sharing data, you don't, HR always looks on with suspicion, they are coming from outside and what is going to happen. So those are the kind of mindsets which need to change. But as long as the will is there and the intent is there, I think solutions can be found. Our company, and again, I don't want to sound, I think it was more, and which is what I keep telling you most of the time, that it has to be a business need in the first place to begin with. Right? I think unless that need is not felt by an organization, I think that really becomes the catalyst for any company, any organization to kind of go on the path, whether it is along social and other rights, whether it's on environment compliances. Now, once you decide that you want to do it, I think you generally evaluate the cost of what it would happen if you did or if you didn't, right? And a lot of the times you find that the cost of doing it is actually a lot easier and simpler than not doing it. So it generally helps you along and you go along that course. I think, and that's what we've found. I think over the last 10, 12 years, we've been working on environment, on worker rights and all of that. And as we've gone along, we've realized it makes it a lot more easier and simpler to manage your business goals, because then you're less worried about what's happening on the compliance side or on the other side, and you can focus more on areas which add value. So I think, in my view, that's probably, in a nutshell, what we have been facing as challenges and what we have tried to look at. So.
I think the takeaway from what he's saying, therefore, is that as good BBA LLBs, how do you calculate the trade-off? When you want to invest in good standards, you should be able to advise companies what will it cost, and will that be so much that it's not affordable or affordable. I think that's an interesting area for you people to study and therefore become leaders in that space. But Sonvi, I'm going to go a little off the script. And we've been talking of vulnerability and informal workers. One of the big pieces we have started working, and you've been doing a lot of study on that, is informality which is formalized through the concept of gig work. young people, students, and we are trying to look at that. What has been your experience in bringing the idea of, better S in the whole gig work?
Yeah, sure. We worked with one large platform. As with anything, intention is a very big hurdle crossed, right? So if you have intention, that's great. If you are in the public eye, that's very good. It adds pressure to be right, to do the right thing. If you are consumer facing business, even better. Easier for people like us to push you down the right path. If you're trying to go IPO, fantastic, right? So we leverage everything that comes our way to help the company. A lot of them we find sit somewhere on the fence. Very few businesses are intentionally vile. Like Samir is saying, we find most businesses either not this particular gig, I'm saying they're pretty large, but most businesses are MSMEs in the country and they lack capacity or capability. And there isn't really a consolidated vision also that was necessarily flowing from the top to the bottom कि हमें अपनी workforce के साथ ये achieve करना है. This is where we want to take them. So there is a lack of guideline, there's a lack of capacity, there's a lack of capability. And when you will be in your jobs, you will be expected to do what is the norm rather than what is the right thing to do. But in the gig platform that we worked with, where the intention was somewhat there, but they didn't realize how much effort it's going to take to go on that journey. And then they went silent for a year, but they came back with homework. They came back with voice. They had studied 1,000 delivery partners over the course of the year and asked them, what would you want from us as your platform to really help you going? Like, what's the vulnerability that keeps you from leading a life of dignity? And you can now see it as a delivery partner well-being framework. They made it public, fortunately. Zomato recently released it, which is an 80 indicator well-being framework on which the delivery partners are rating the platform. That's what I mean by agile systems. When you're talking of such a unorganized set of people who you don't see in your office every day, आप शक्ल देख के नहीं बता सकते कि उसकी तबीयत खराब है. You have to rely on something else, which is not culture, which is not face-to-face interpersonal relationships. You have to rely on a system that is agile enough for you to know that today the floods in Uttarakhand have caused this disruption and this is what we don't have. Or the contractors and the leads in Patna are causing this challenge and we have to correct this. When you have a business that scale, you need an agile voice inputting mechanism along a common framework. So we gave them a framework. It goes all the way from financial well-being to mental well-being to social acceptance and well-being, and 9 other such elements along 80 odd indicators, and they are now using it to hear from 30 odd cities where the business operates, from at least 100 workers in each city as to what are the big challenges across those 80 odd indicators, and therefore what should each region focus on or not focus on. So that's kind of how we've tried to help that scale of an operation, and with you, Gagan, of course.
So Samir, I want to take a little bit of a different approach because of your work. While Gagan was introducing you, he was talking about you're involved with the nature conservation, heritage initiative. Those are the kinds of areas. A few corporates, I come from Mumbai, so I know some of them who are involved in these kinds of areas. But the question I want to ask you is how some of these initiatives inform the type of leadership you bring to associations like FGI or in your own company. How does that inform your leadership when you get engaged with some of these kinds of things?
I think it's first thing, like I said, is as a business, I think it's important to deal with stakeholders, right? Now, stakeholders is also the community that you are in. It's the city that you live in. It's the environment that you're part of. So I think that's the first part. I've been lucky. I've had the opportunity to have had access. And being in a place like Baroda, I've had the opportunity to have had access to different forums. And as somebody who has taken initiatives, my idea has always been that organization, and typically, like I said earlier, in civic society, NGOs, which are working, whether they are in, they need to find convergence. I think everybody tries to work in their own silos, and they find challenges, and they are never able to, let's say, gainfully find solutions to those challenges. And I don't know for what reason, this whole, I'm part of the Heritage Trust, I'm part of the Gujarat Nature Conservation Society, and everywhere I look, now I see everything in those 17 SDG goals that we look at. And I find, okay, this is something that kind of flows from somewhere, and it just kind of, and I try to bring that into the organization that I'm part of, So at FGI, we'll talk about sustainability, and we'll talk about how the association itself can help to promote, help to conserve and the heritage of the city. So I think generally I find that unless organizations find convergence about their goals, I think it's going to be difficult for that change that we just spoke about. I think we just spoke about that earlier, where we said the government, civic society and businesses need to find convergence. And the same way, organizations working in different areas need to find that convergence. Otherwise, by themselves, they'll always find challenges which are very, very difficult to overcome. And we know that. I think on a daily basis, we see that and we know that.
So, Sonvi, you mentioned about the some of the experience from the COVID-19 kind of era. As always, people say that anytime, any kind of a incidents of that kind of a nature. Now, recently, the state we come from, Maharashtra, is facing what is called the wet drought in very, very large parts of Maharashtra, right? But some of the approaches coming from those kinds of emergencies, humanitarian kind of situations, how do they, and that's impact on the informal sector especially, and in that kind of a context, what kind of role, the various stakeholders, you as social compact, working with all the multiple stakeholders, including the industry, what do you see, how does that inform your approach to, defining the strategies going forward?
So, in addition to working inside companies, which is long-term work and takes its own course, we also, in partnership with our NGO partners like Gagan's organization and Ajivika Bureau and Worker Fair and Free, run worker facilitation centers on the ground, mostly inside industrial parks, because we decided that we were going to focus on the intersection of work and industry. Which become not only first respondents but also eyes and ears on the ground, right? To say, here is maybe a contemporary challenge, or here is an ongoing malpractice that I'd like to bring to your attention, right? And how we're going to address it. So we have that operation as well, but we, at a more strategic level, I think I've already said it, and we try to gather all such episodes to say that you're running a very fragile system. This is not a system on which an insurance company would have given you insurance to your business. Yeah, I don't know how you feel and whether you get that critique or at all or not. But आपको कल की production का पता नहीं है कि आप कैसे करेंगे, because आप तो rely कर रहे हैं कि people will just be flowing in. Samir is saying people feel there aren't people to train, but that's not what I hear from industry. When I go to SMEs and I tell them, tomorrow if a big order came to you, how are you going to produce? Say, RFP डाल देंगे, hire कर लेंगे बाहर से, 2 लाख worker hire कर लेंगे, हो जाएगा. This is the mentality with which a large part of business is running, that I am going to run as per the visible production I need to do. I have no vision outside of that. So therefore, it's not incumbent upon me to grow anybody, because I don't know about my growth only. 3 months, beyond 3 months from now. And then there is a second cadre perhaps of industry that says, okay, हमें 1 साल का पता है कि हमारा इतना productivity होने वाला है, so उतने के लिए जितना चाहिए we will hire. So I do feel that, I think I've deviated a little bit from your question, but one is we try to help industry see that better visibility on the growth potential of your business is good not only for the business but also for the people who are working for you, because you might feel some incentive to grow them, to be able to deliver on that business. So we recently developed a business growth and worker growth frame for one of our companies that we were advising. Very simple things, and again it boils down to ऐसा कभी exposure किया ही नहीं किसी college ने. Which college is churning out IR people? You tell me. Give me the name. Maybe XLR is 2 colleges that are doing industrial relation courses too. These are the people who deal with the S for the bottom rung of the workforce in the companies. There's nothing like production related growth of people frame that a normal IR person will be able to give. I don't know in your company. That's the कि 3 साल में कंपनी की प्रोडक्शन ट्रिपल होने वाली है या डबल होने वाली है या 30% से बढ़ने वाली है, तो कितने स्किल सेट्स की डिमांड बढ़ेगी? How many do we have? How many do we need to grow? How do we grow them? What is the frame I have to evaluate skills today for this cadre of the workforce, which is not your MBBS, MBA,
Yeah.
BA. How do I say that you're now capable of independent work, you're now semi-skilled, you're now highly skilled, and so on and so forth. So we find ourselves trying to not only make the case, but also make the horse drink the water by building these frames and saying it's not so hard, let's go step by step. Let's come to a place where we have gone beyond confusion and feeling a sense of overwhelming. And really try to go to the other side and said, "Acha, aise karna hai." Let's start putting the data down to see what is the direction it's giving us.
I think now let's open up the second round of the open conversation.
I'm Atik Saru from second year. So earlier, ma'am, you talked about the social compact, where you give an example that if a company is hiring 1,000 workers, it will not be accountable for all the thousands, but for only the 200 employees that have a role in that company. But a theory known as the stakeholder theory by Edward Freeman argues otherwise. It argues that a company or corporate business serves all its stakeholders, including employees, workers, managers, and directorial board, not just shareholders. So, if corporate or business is accountable, if a corporate or business is accountable to all the shareholders, to all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, how do they balance profit with investment by strengthening the rule of law?
Good evening, sir. Good evening. I am Khushi Thakkar from first year. My question is, if we imagine a Viksit Bharat in 2047, what should be the ideal role of corporates in ensuring that the rule of law is not just maintained but actively strengthened? Should corporates limit themselves to compliance, or should they also take proactive steps in promoting fairness, transparency, and accountability in society?
Myself, Sonvi Khanna, third year. So my question is, can we generally talk about rule of law when whistleblowers in the corporate sector often face retaliation and silence instead of protection?
First of all, welcome all the dignitaries. My name is Om. I am an assistant professor at LG School of Law, and I have also been an alumni of LG School of Law. So I have done BB LLB from here only. What I believe is, in India we have both private and government doing things together. Like the taxes we pay are like UK, but at the same time the things we have to buy are like USA. So why can't we just, instead of, on paper we are mixed economy, but why can't we just be like a capitalist country and let the corporate take the lead, instead of having too many cooks making a mess?
Good evening, ma'am. Sir, my question to you, ma'am, is since you were talking about the workers' efficiencies and all of that, so on similar lines, we as young professionals now we are working and going out to the world. So, what are the particular skills and mindsets should we cultivate in order to build and have just and sustainable businesses in the future?
Jai Soni from the first year. My question is, if the corporate are facing high compliance charges and also the rigid rules, why should the corporate why should the corporate be the partner of legal system, or else like they can be filed or they can see the legal rules as a obstacle in the growth?
I am Alvira Khani from Semester 1. I am having a particular question to sir. Sir, as you mentioned that corporates are following rule of law. But don't you think just following rule of law is not enough? And corporates should aim to shape lawful society around them?
Go ahead.
Sir, as good evening, this is Bhavya Kotidia from third year. As quoted by Samir sir, corporates follow the rule of law. But if you understand the concept behind the rule of law as propounded by A.V. Dicey, he stated that laws shall be only maintained, regulated and controlled by the courts. Now, if the corporates start to mandate or invest in the rule of law, wherein the topic is not being covered by the courts, then how will the corporates speak up to wherein the court is itself silent, the law is itself silent about the same? If the corporate is not speaking, it is a violation of rule of law, and then if a corporate is going beyond the court, it is again the violation of law. How will this irony or paradox will be regulated by the corporates in the same?
Okay.
I am Mahinoor Moini from first semester. As we are working under the rule of law, but don't you think that people in power influence rule of law negatively and affect the judicial independence and cause monopolies?
My name is Vajratna Goswami. I am in the last year of BBA LLB course. I would like to ask that there are already many substantive laws like Companies Act is there, as well as labor laws is there, and legislation is doing their part on the basis of their social aspects. But on the corporate side, if you are discussing in the labor law sides, then many companies are using CSR or any other medium as a marketing medium. So how corporates are thinking of changing that to the employee mindset, that not only the corporate, also the government, also the corporate side, both the employment mindset could be changed to the perfectly sustainable development side.
My question is to Sonvi ma'am. In a nation aspiring to be Viksit Bharat, should corporates confine labor welfare as a legal obligation, or should they elevate it to a moral foundation which is essential for justice, inclusivity and responsible capitalism? Thank you.
So I would say, while responding to some of these questions, also in a way people want to also know what is your guidance to the students who are going to be joining the job market. Okay, what are the kinds of skill set, competencies? Somebody asked that question, that we should be aspiring for. I think those are the kinds of areas which also, if we touch upon as part of the closing statement, will be very important.
Also, I think they are talking of a lot of contradictions that they are facing.
Yeah.
And how do they handle that polarity in becoming lawyers who are ethical?
Can I add one more question?
Please.
Okay, so in the era of artificial intelligence, that my question is, already there are multiple labor laws, multiple compliances, and the corporates are thinking that instead of paying so much of gratuity, provident fund and ESI and so many things, why not to hire a robot or an artificial intelligence which can replace hundreds of workers and will do the work more accurately, and they can even get the benefit in taxation for depreciation as well. So what do you suggest to strike a balance between the technological advancement and the labor laws, because the labor laws should not be so burdensome that the corporates would replace the labor with the artificial intelligence?
That's a subject matter for another long podcast. And actually that was one of the things we also were suggesting to some of the universities, but maybe we could touch it a little bit. It's a very complex issue that you have raised, Chaitali, but we should look at it.
So I think each of these questions probably merit a separate podcast. So I think this whole ideological questions that have come up in terms of how invested should corporates be in shaping laws, and I mean, I'm surprised that a lot of you feel that, I'm sure the house is divided on that point. I'm quite sure that there is still a significant investment that corporates have in shaping laws. And I think what we call lobbying and all of that. So I don't think we can kind of divorce the two. I think we've also seen a very, very recent example of what can happen when a Mr. Musk, Elon Musk, becomes a part of the administration. And I'm not opining either way, but we've seen the kind of chaos it can cause. Insofar as businesses are concerned, they have to function within, and I think this is again treading into very various, multifarious territories, and we probably don't have enough time to debate and disengage all of that. But having said that, I think by and large, businesses, all of us, why businesses? I think as individuals, as parts of groups, and businesses are also groupings within a society, all of us are held together by rule of law. I think that's the kind of, that's the structure that society gets by having a proper judicial system and by having laws which which we need to follow. Obviously, there is a challenge in terms of implementation of those laws, and which I think to various degrees varies from country to country. I'm not sure if we can think of a perfect system if it exists today. It's also so businesses need to be part of that ecosystem. Businesses need to follow laws, and I think I did hear some questions about where laws are made burdensome and then the cost of sticking, and which is compliance. Those are some of the challenges which we spoke about, right? That when you are doing the trade-off, what is the trade-off in terms of do you follow laws or you don't? So that's the ambiguity and the uncertainty that is part of decision making. And all I can say is welcome to the real world. I think you are all, I think once you move from school to college, you're just kind of expanding your universe. But when you move from college to corporate world, and I think that's the kind of uncertainty that comes every day. And I think the forums like these prepare you for that. I think so it's important that all of you, I'm so extremely happy to see the kind of interaction that has happened today. I think in terms of the questions and very, very solid questions which have come up. I'm afraid I don't think anybody can give you those answers. You really have to find those answers for yourself. And all I can say is that, again, like just repeating that, welcome to this world, welcome to the real world. Uncertainty every day is going to be part of what you do. AI is only adding to that, right? And I'm not sure if AI today is ready to replace the human being. What it does, the way I see it today, is it helps you become productive, more efficient. I think it gives you access to resources which otherwise you would not have. I think it helps to embellish. I mean, when we were growing up, we had access to libraries and we had to go look for books. Today, all of you have that at the at the press of a button. So you're very lucky that you have that, but you're also extremely unlucky because it doesn't give you the time to understand, to digest. Maybe some of you have just gone on to ChatGPT and framed the question. So it doesn't really give you the understanding in depth of what really a solution is and what the problem is. So I think AI there is still some way to go. I think insofar as what we are discussing here today in terms of we still have to look at a sustainable society. I think let's start from there. A business is part of that society. If we want equity and equitable growth for all, if businesses need to survive, then we need to ensure that we are doing that in a fair and empathetic manner. I think that's kind of just how I would.
So, just picking on the ideological rift that I got, I think we're bound by two things. One is the rule of law, which kind of is the recognized piece. The other is the collective sense of well-being, which you are seeing is getting ruined quite significantly with the amount of mental health downturn we are taking. And that's partly because growth is inequitable, joys of life, basics of life, dignity and its definition is highly inequitable in most parts of the world, but also within the country. So I think two things, right? Taking one step forward from, as someone slightly newer to this conversation than maybe Samir is, because he must have done it for like many years. I found in the last 5 years that the tensions that you see, don't stay silent on them. We found it very useful to call them out. And we saw that many people were troubled by it and many people echoed it. And that became the start of questioning the status quo. Not in any Kranti manner, but as just logical minds trying to see why this world is not making sense and why such lose-lose equations are ruling the show, right? I think we sit on many lose-lose equations. We've spoken of some of them today. Of myopic growth for business, myopic growth for workers is a lose-lose equation. But we take it as the status, we take it कि ऐसे ही है, हमें क्या पता, कोई बताएगा तब सुन लेंगे. So I think as you enter the world of work and you feel a tension, please call it out. Even if it's only meant to be parked, that's fine. Second, please see that as lawyers, you're not just contributing to the rule of law, but also to that collective sense of well-being. Is your decision, is your advice at the cost of one versus the other? We again find that very useful, and we advise companies. Obviously, it's very easy to do what is being expected, but we always ask ourselves the question: is this really going to push the mission forward, or is it just good for us as the platform? And I think the third, that as you kind of pick on these debates or these conversations, don't let it remain restricted to just yourself. There is only one thing that is documented evidence globally that corporates are afraid of, and that's the opinion of their white-collar workforce. It's the only thing. They're not afraid of the blue-collar workforce's opinion at all. But if you can become custodians in your companies of those who don't yet have a voice, a seat at the table, you are playing your part in one, not just taking one's voice for one's own good, but also for the good of the larger. So you raised, this has become an ideological conversation, but I think it's important for a young country, an energetic country, to have some ideology, which unfortunately we think it's all gotten replaced by AI, I think. Ideology comes from AI now, not from what we want to see the country as and who we want to be as this country grows young with us, right? So I just request you to have these two hats and not just the legal hat as you walk through your roles going forward.
You know, I'm innocent putting it all together. And what Samir said is taking this thing of rule of law to the next level, which is corporate ethics. It's becoming responsible citizen. At the bottom is what he said, if you're a corporate, you better make money. If you don't make money, the rest is nonsense. But when you make money, the next level is obey the law. You cannot make money and not obey the law. And then, I think if you are obeying the law, and if you don't obey the law, there should be a system to punish you. And if that punishment system is not in place, we will not move up. And I think the next is be ethical. And that's where the social compact tries to come in. Be ethical, which means be, obligation to what is right, just, fair. So justice, fairness, empathy, and then if you are that, then you become a community philanthropist, what he is. Let's not go there. But then what Sonvi says is, listen and learn. And when you listen, I invite you all. We have about several worker facilitation centers across Gujarat. Come and spend a week. Listen, and you'll know what the real world is from that side. I think that's important, that you listen and learn from those who are vulnerable. But the solutioning is what Sonvi taught, is one, I think Samir taught, think in wholes, not in compartment. And thinking in wholes is opposite of when you do subject. And Chaitali and I had done this, how not to teach law.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes, I remember.
But I think in the end, Sonvi brought this. It's when we talk to industry and you prepare yourself to be industry. One is capacity. Do you have the capacity? But before you have the capacity, does the industry have the conviction? If it doesn't have the conviction, there's no question of capacity. And if you have the capacity, then you build capabilities through a fitness system. I think that's the roadmap which I've been listening to from both of them. Thank you so much. But Minar, in terms of unmute, because it was about unmuting with you, and believe me, you have really unmuted this podcast so well by your question. But Minar.
Just 2 sentences. So I think one of the critical questions you asked, what is important is to really be engaged in the space of ideas. Don't think contradiction is a burden. Contradictions are part of learning. Contestation is part of learning. So contest, contradict, think through, read. A lot of people now have stopped reading, which is what is the big problem from my perspective. Whether you read or actually use the audible, I don't care, but read something new and interesting every time. Otherwise, what Chaitali was raising in terms of AI and the challenges, it's already, you will see sector-wise papers of implications of AI, including implications of AI for the legal and your very advanced papers written for UK, USA, actually projecting what will be the situation of particular sectors when the AI unfolds itself fully. Okay, India is not going to be far away from it. Those implications are going to come, if not 5 years, not next 10 years. And already those predictions are there already. What types of jobs in what industries are going to be null and void. Okay, so if you don't want to be caught into not knowing, it's important that you start actually reading something important. I know many people use ChatGPT or Google. When people start using Google Scholar, Google Research, then I'm interested in talking to them. But if they're only Googling, that's gone. That's 20 years back. You're already 20 years behind if you're only Googling. But if you're not into Google Research, Google Scholars, you're lost it already at some extent, because you asked that question, what kind of things we should be looking at, So those are the kinds of things, whether you need an iPhone or whether you want to have a subscription of a ChatGPT professional by paying $20 per month. Those are kinds of choices you make, and you have to make those choices at some stage. So please register yourself for Unmute. You are going to listen to number of these ideas coming through, because Unmute podcast is focused on evolving relationship between civil society, state and market. So you are part of the civil society, you are part, some of you will become prosecutors with the state in that sense, some of you will become part of the market, part of the industry, working with the industry, legal departments of industries, so it may be interesting for you. So with that, may I request Dr. Vidisha to come and deal with a vote of thanks, please.
Yeah, coming to the most difficult portion from my side, because having such a good discussion where law students are very much interested, because it's all about business and human rights, but the way Mr. Khera and Miss Khanna has made it, it's extremely thankful for the same, because we are, comparatively not imagined so well that society and business will go such a longer hand in hand, the way you have explained. So thank you so much for enlightening that this is not something we are competing about, this is something we really need to have. Business and society need to go hand in hand. How? That is something we are figuring out. Thank you so much. Mr. Shetty and Mr. Pimple. For being the path that has led this thirsty people to the ocean of knowledge. Thank you so much, Mr. Sethi and Mr. Gagan. I must appreciate as well as thank Dr. Jani for making this happen here at our campus. Thank you so much, ma'am, for all your efforts. We know that how much you were behind all this. We are thankful to Avasti sir for that. Before thanking next set of people, I would like to narrate something. You must have noticed I was on my phone. My family was keep checking on. Is it really necessary when you are on the time, can deliver any point of time, So I said that yes, if I'll not go, I'll miss something. So for that, team unmute. Thank you so much for making this happen. I must say that I would have missed if I had not. Last but not least, I would like to take one sentence from Madam. She had mentioned that law students or the future professionals must not be just manager of law but the custodian of law. And considering your inputs, questions, I'm pretty sure our students are not just gonna be managers. So kudos to you all for being part of it. Thank you. I would like to thank all my colleagues and supporting staff. Thank you so much, everyone.